Phil Anderson is the rock star and General Manager of Policy and Professionalism of the AFA, and he has been in the financial services industry for over 20 years. At the AFA, Phil has the responsibility for policy and the implementation of the requirements of the new professional standards legislation, and we are delighted to have him here today. Please welcome Phil Anderson.
Don't stop believing. Hold on to that feeling. Street light people.
Thank you, Karen, and good morning, everyone. A policy rock star. Wow, that would have to be the ultimate oxymoron. Okay, that's that song, Don't Stop Believing, an 80s classic. That's my core message today. Don't stop believing in the value of financial advice and what you do for your clients. Certainly, times may seem pretty tough at the moment, and some of what I present this morning you might find challenging. However, it could be worse. Recently I went to see the dentist, and as I sat in the chair with all this stuff in my mouth, my back arched, my fist clenched, it just struck me. Inflicting pain on your clients is hardly the way to start a good relationship. We have it so much easier. All right, today we're going to talk about the Royal Commission. We're going to have a look at some stuff that ASIC's doing, including recent reports, and of course FASEA. We'll talk in detail about FASEA. I'm going to end then with some discussion around the budget changes and the impact on insurance and super, and also what the Productivity Commission is doing. Now, I want to start with a list of key faces. Now, let me put this question to you. Who knows who this lady here is? Does anyone know who that lady is? Surely someone knows. Okay, that lady there is Catherine Walter. She is the chair of the FASEA board. She is the lady in charge of the board that is making all of these incredibly critical decisions that impact your futures. Of course, everyone knows Kelly O'Dwyer. Now, the guy in the top right-hand corner is James Shipton. He's the new chair of ASIC, the head honcho at our regulator. Very important person. And these guys in the bottom row, they are the true superstars. They are the rock stars of the Royal Commission. You'll all know them very well. Right, let's talk about the Royal Commission. Who here saw the Four Corners program on Monday night? Quite a few. The ABC will be very pleased with the viewer numbers, but I guess from this audience they should expect to see a lot of people take an interest. Much of what they said on Monday, of course, we'd already seen through the Royal Commission. And it was those 2 weeks of round two back in April that were incredibly challenging for all of us to sit and see these stories play out and see what headlines it generated across the media. Through that process and at the end of it, a set of questions were asked that really got to the core of financial advice and the business models that operate. We'll talk more about those questions. We've seen some casualties. We've seen the CEO, the chair, the general counsel at AMP all leave. We've seen Terry McMaster and Dover close. We've seen Sam Henderson leave the industry. And we will probably see more that comes as a result. We still have 3 rounds of the Royal Commission to go. On the 6th of August, the superannuation round kicks off. There's about 14 super funds that are going to be grilled over that 2-week period. And then from the 10th of September, we're going to see another 2 weeks on insurance. Now, the real highlight is going to be the last round on the 19th of November, which is all about policy. I'm sure you'll find that interesting. There's a lot of really big stuff that's going to play out, and we will expect to see some key recommendations come out of this. Now, so far, to the end of June, there'd been over 7,000 public submissions. 10% of that related to financial advice. A lot of clients have had their chance to make a complaint to the Royal Commission. Okay, the 26th of April was Phil Kewen's Day in the Sun. In fact, he only got 45 minutes, but I'm sure it felt like an entire lifetime. Huge amount of work went into preparation for those 45 minutes, months of work. It was a very, very challenging process, and for anyone who's participated in this exercise, it was incredibly difficult. You might notice this guy here. Someone last week asked, "Is that you?" Well, it's not me for two key reasons. One, I'd never let my hair grow that long. But secondly, of course, I'm always going to listen intently to everything that my boss says. All right, let's now go through some of those 28 questions. 28 questions, much of which got to the core of what we do. And I'm just going to read you through the questions, and then I'm going to give you a set of some of the responses. So the first question, do clients receive any meaningful benefit from ongoing service arrangements? That's a pretty blunt question. Do you add value to your clients? Should grandfathered commissions cease? And this is one that's got a lot of media coverage since. Does vertical integration serve the interests of clients? Should the statutory carve-outs to the ban on conflicted remuneration, including in relation to insurance commissions, be maintained? You know, we're barely 6 months into the LIF regime and the Royal Commission's asking whether it should be maintained. Now, what I want to do now is just take you through some of ASIC's responses to these questions. And I think it is necessary to understand where our regulator is coming from on some of these core questions. The first one, ASIC is concerned that many, perhaps even most clients who are currently paying for ongoing advice may not receive benefits from that advice commensurate with the cost. These are direct quotes from what the regulators said in their submission to the Royal Commission. That is fundamentally challenging the value of financial advice. It goes on. Ongoing service would provide meaningful value to a customer if the fee for service were required to be invoiced to the customer and specifically authorised. That fundamentally changes our current remuneration model of automatic monthly withdrawals of advisor service fees. If you needed to provide an invoice every time and they needed to approve it every time, what impact would that have? ASIC believes that grandfathering of commission should cease as soon as reasonably practical and to the maximum possible extent. There's no ambiguity in that message. However, there were a couple of points that there is a finer balance. A vertically integrated business model gives rise to inherent conflict of interest which needs to be carefully managed. ASIC was not calling for an end to vertical integration. In fact, what they were saying was, yes, it presented a set of risks, however, those risks need to be carefully managed. And then on the issue of life insurance, they made the point that they will be reviewing the impact of LIF in 2021, and in their view, that course of action would ensure that any further reforms are firmly supported by evidence. That gave us a sense of confidence that ASIC was not calling for an end to life insurance commissions. Now let's have a look at Choice. Choice have been an organisation that have been quite outspoken over the years and quite opposed to financial advice and oppositional to some of the things that the industry has been calling for. So I'll just take you through their statements. On the evidence, it is difficult to see what meaningful benefits clients receive from ongoing service arrangements. They don't believe in the value of advice. That poses the challenge that we have to make sure that the community does understand the value that advice provides. And it's not just the piece of paper that you put in front of clients. It's giving them the sense of confidence about the future, giving them a sense of security that they are protected, knowing that they have a plan for the future. Banning ongoing fees for advice and forcing advisors to prove their worth by having to pitch for repeat custom would remove the conflicts that drive poor outcomes. Now that is a comment very similar to ASIC's comment about needing to invoice and have each invoice separately authorised. Asset-based fees create conflicts that may encourage advisors to give poor quality advice. There are conflicts in all forms of remuneration, whether it's an hourly rate basis or it's a flat fee. Asset-based fees are not the only form that has conflicts, and gee, if it's okay for product providers to charge on that basis, then surely it's okay for financial advisors to also do the same. They've called to cease grandfathered commissions, and also Choice were not calling for a complete breakup of vertically integrated groups. They said it was not on its own the panacea. They were very, very clear on life insurance. They think that ASIC should use the LIF instrument to introduce a glide path to zero for life insurance commissions. Now, I think it's important to get the context of where the Royal Commission went to and some of the questions that were put forward and what some of the stakeholders are calling for. Obviously, the AFA responded to those 28 questions. We put in our submission. We certainly emphasised the value of financial advice. We questioned whether they really did understand it. We questioned whether there was an appreciation of the real impact that financial advice has on clients. That impact that you get to experience day in, day out when you talk to clients and you see the value you deliver. We also took the opportunity to put a few articles out there through stories through Money Management around grandfathering and whether what they were calling for was just a simplistic solution, whether in fact it really did get to the core of the policy objective. And I'll talk more about that. On the 17th of May, we had a speech delivered by the new chair of ASIC who called for a removal of all conflicts of interest in financial advice. We were quite concerned about that because did that mean they had changed in the course of 2 weeks their view on life insurance commissions? Now, Senator John Wacker-Williams put a question at a Senate estimates hearing, and he basically said to the chair of ASIC, "You've made a speech calling for an end to all conflicts of interest, yet it's your own legislative instrument that permits commissions on life insurance. Please explain." And to that, he did say that he had been talking about superannuation investments and not life insurance. So I think we do have confidence that ASIC is not calling for an end to commissions on life insurance at this point. Now, just to go through the issue of grandfathering, there's been a lot of discussion on this, but I don't think everyone fully understands all of the issues in it. And it's important that we put those issues forward. So the points that we make are around this. What is the policy objective of those calling for this? Is it that they want to pull income away from the advisor community? Is it that they want to make sure that services is being provided when trail commission is being paid? Or is it that they actually want to find a better solution to enable clients to be moved from uncompetitive legacy products to new, modern, competitive products? And it's only if the objective is for the benefit of clients that it's justified. That work needs to be done. The assumption also at the Royal Commission that for some reason grandfathered trail commissions made up a huge percentage of practice income was flawed as well. Now, if you turn off trail commissions, who gets the benefit of it? The product providers get to keep the money. Well, that's a real win for clients. They don't get the money, but they don't get the advice either. That's a complete failure. And there are a range of obstacles that prevent clients being moved from uncompetitive products to new competitive products. These are things like exit fees, capital gains tax, deeming treatment for income stream products, that if they lose, they may also lose their pension. And there are other clients whose health has deteriorated and they may no longer be able to get insurance on the same terms. The government needs to deal with these obstacles before they rush forward with a decision to remove grandfathered commissions. And of course, the last point, one that was played out very clearly through the whole FOFA debate, was that the government could not simply take property away without just compensation, and if they did, then they would need to pay compensation for it. Now, what I want to do now is just run a poll question. I want to ask you, in your practice, how important in terms of percentage of total practice income is trail commissions on superannuation investments? It is just a question with respect to what percentage of total income grandfathered trail commissions make up of total practice income. It excludes life insurance because life insurance is not, in that sense, grandfathered. It's covered under the LIF framework. So only answer this in terms of it. Now, on your table, you will find a sheet of paper that explains how to respond. As you can see on the screen, you can either text that response or go online. Now, this is useful information for us to frame our response in the next round to the Royal Commission, to emphasise the genuine relevance of grandfathered commissions in practice income. Mike, can we have a look at the results? Well, there you go. And I think that's very clear that it is a small percentage of total practice income. There are some groups where it's more important, but the vast majority is it's a low percentage of total practice income. Now, if you're still working through voting, we very much appreciate you doing that because, as I said, we're going to use this information for future submissions. Right now, the reason why that's been such a key factor is when Jack Regan from AMP was on the witness stand at the Royal Commission, he spent a day and a half being tortured on the stand. That was incredibly tough. But at one point, he got asked a question about how important was grandfathered commissions to the AMP dealer group's income. And he made a comment about 60 to 70%. But obviously, he was talking about the broader commissions. It included life insurance commissions. It probably included mortgage broking commissions and other forms of income that they received. The problem is that that statement got used by ASIC to suggest that we hadn't seen the expected decline in grandfathered commissions following FOFA. And Choice more directly came out and referred to and suggested that it highlighted the fundamental problem that they thought was there. This, of course, was clarified when investment trends came out just a short time later and highlighted that, in fact, grandfathered commissions had declined from 30% in 2010 to just 9% now. It only makes up a small fraction of total practice income. So this whole issue has been the subject of an overreaction. However, that won't prevent this from continuing to play out. There is a level of momentum now. We've seen BT and Macquarie move on it with respect to grandfathered commission payments to salaried advisors. But I just make the point that not even Donald Trump is comfortable with some of these proposals. All right, let me now move on to talk about ASIC. ASIC was on the stand also at the Royal Commission, and both in that forum and through the media, they have been challenged about why they've tended to favour using enforceable undertakings rather than taking criminal and civil action against licensees and institutions. And interestingly to see that since that point, they have launched civil penalty proceedings against both Westpac and AMP. And obviously, they've also been very actively involved in what happened with Dover. We expect them to now be more on the front foot and more assertive in terms of taking court action against individual players. We've also seen this year some key reports released on the quality of financial advice. Now, if I can take you back to October 2014, when we saw the release of 413, which highlighted that 37% of advice that they'd assessed in that exercise was non-compliant. We weren't to know at that time that that would be the high point, because since then we've seen 562 on super advice in vertically integrated groups that has suggested a 75% non-compliant rate. And then in report 575, most recently released last month on SMSF advice, the analysis was a 91% outcome of non-compliant advice. These are disturbing numbers. Now, we're not sure the exact reason for it, but it is clear that across the financial advice profession, more needs to be done to ensure that advisors understand their best interest duty obligations and how we make sure that in future those numbers improve. Okay, let me now talk about FASEA. The whole FASEA process, I guess, has become incredibly intense in December last year. It caused a lot of concern, a lot of confusion, a lot of anxiety. We have gone through a process of running town hall meetings around the country, and Phil Kewen talked about that earlier on. We used that as the vehicle to collect member feedback in response to the draft position statement that we had prepared and released in early June, and it fed into our final submission on the 29th of June. Now, in that submission, we made some key points. Firstly, we acknowledge that we have supported the intent of an increase in the minimum education standards for financial advisors. Now, I'm talking about the minimum standard. Many of you are already way above what the minimum has been in the past, and some potentially above what it will be in the future. We highlighted that what FASEA had proposed did not take account of experience or existing qualifications. CPD, the advanced diploma, professional designations, all haven't been taken account of. We talked about the risk, particularly with older experienced advisors, of a mass exodus and the implications of that in terms of the damage it will do to their practices, their employed staff, their clients, and also losing the access to that group to mentor new advisors to help them rapidly come up the learning curve. We highlighted that FASEA had not taken into account some of the clear messages in the explanatory memorandum, which is the Parliament's understanding or intent of what the law is going to do. Things like recognising CPD, recognising advanced diplomas, recognising other forms of education that people have undertaken. And we also made the point that whatever happens, further study needs to give advisors the opportunity to study stuff that is interesting and of value to them and their business. Now, in framing our submission, we built it on a set of principles. These principles, this framework, identifies the fact that, yes, professionalism is critical. We do want to raise the standard, and we do want to seek public recognition of financial advice as a profession. But we also want there to be equity in the model. It does not make sense to have someone who's done a commerce degree with a marketing major, an MBA, an advanced diploma, and then a professional designation, and be told you're in exactly the same position as someone who did their RG146 conversion course in 2003 and has not opened a textbook since. Sustainability. We need to hold on to the profession that we have. We do not want to see a mass exodus. We need to find a way to take people on this journey, not leave them behind. And as I said, value for you in what you study. We don't want people studying stuff, kicking and screaming. We actually want them to do it because they want to get something out of it. Now, I'm going to quickly take you through what our positions were. First of all, we'll talk about related degree. The problem with FASEA's last proposal is they said it depended upon what your major or specialisation was. An undergraduate degree is 24 subjects. A major may be as few as 6 subjects. So what about the other 18 subjects? If you have done it in those recognised fields, then you should be recognised for it. So we have said that a related degree should be assessed on the basis of whether it contains at least 6 subjects in that list. That's a much more sensible outcome. It'll recognise people who have done other majors but completed those core content. We've also said that in terms of the bridging course, combine the Corporations Act and the Code of Ethics into a single subject and give people the ability to get RPL for behavioural finance. When it comes to unrelated degrees, we've said there's a need to recognise the additional training that they may have done. So if they've done the ADFP or DFP 1 to 8 and they've done a professional designation, then treat them the same as someone who's got a related degree and give them access to that 3-subject bridging course, or if we get our call, 2 subjects. When it comes to people with no degree, we said we also need to recognise those who've done further study, whether it's the ADFP, DFP 1 to 8, or a professional designation. Give them the ability to do a 4-subject graduate certificate, not an 8-subject graduate diploma. Recognising people who've got responsible manager experience, broadening the list of subjects that are available as part of a graduate diploma so that you've got greater opportunity to get recognition for study you've already done and greater choice to allow you to do stuff that is genuinely of interest to you. And we've also put together a new category around experienced older advisors. We've said for advisors who are over 55, as at the end of 2023, who have at least 15 years experience, give them the opportunity to do a 4-subject graduate certificate rather than the 8-subject graduate diploma, subject to a sunset clause, which would give them an extra 6 years to operate. Our view is get them interested, give them a target that seems achievable, and they may then at least make the decision to start that first subject. They may actually find that they do okay, they're comfortable with it, and they push on and do the 4 subjects, and they stay in the race. That's what we want here. Now, we've been really pleased to see that the SMSF Association have come out with a similar proposal since we put this out there. The stockbrokers have also put a proposal out there that's virtually identical to ours. And the CPAs have come out and said there's a need to recognise people with experience. We hope that this makes some progress. Well, we certainly did hope that the feedback that FASEA had got as part of the education standards round would impact their thinking going forward. Possibly not. We've seen the exam consultation paper a couple of weeks ago, and then earlier this week we've seen other things like 50 hours of CPD. Everything seems to be pushed to the extreme at the moment. In terms of the exam, they've set the curriculum requirements. There's a level of alignment with that bridging course content. 3 to 4 hours, multi-choice and short answer, face-to-face in exam rooms in capital cities, a 65% pass mark, but 75% for the Code of Ethics study. Closed book, a maximum of 2 resets. Now the thing is, if it's closed book, 4 hours, and you've got to understand all 500 pages of Chapter 7 of the Corporations Act, that is just a little bit too challenging. We need to do a lot more work to get a more practical outcome here. Now I want to make a point about timing. Timing is becoming a challenge. The Code of Ethics subject is going to be important to pass your degree equivalence. It's also going to be important to pass your exam. And it's ridiculous to expect you to be accountable to a code that you won't have had the chance to study before it becomes operational. Now I'm just going to end on a quick discussion around the budget changes and the Productivity Commission. We have seen the Insurance in Super Working Group put out a set of proposals late last year, and then in May we saw some recommendations in the budget, and then also we saw the Productivity Commission's report come out shortly afterwards. I'll take you through these really quickly. The Super Code of Practice talked about capping insurance at 1% of salary, which will really put a lid on it. They also talked about cancellation of income protection after being inactive for 13 months, cancellation of death and TPD for clients with balances of less than $6,000 after being inactive for 13 months. Have a look at the budget changes, a 3% cap on fees, a ban on exit fees, insurance for under 25s going to an opt-in basis, insurance for low balances under 6,000 going to an opt-in basis. And what that means is if you start a new job and a new account is set up for you, you will not have insurance for possibly up to the first year or two. Is that really what we want? Insurance for inactive accounts where they've got no contributions or rollovers in 13 months will become opt-in. The risk is that strategies that have been deliberately set up to rely upon existing insurance arrangements could be put at risk as a result of this. When we look at the Productivity Commission, they're talking about having people default into a super fund just once in their life, which makes eminent sense. Duplicate accounts is in no one's best interest. They've also talked about having this list of 10 funds that you could choose from. They've talked about sensibly limiting exit fees to cost recovery, disclosure of all trail commissions in product statements, and then on the insurance front, once again, making insurance for under 25s opt-in, insurance for inactive accounts to cease after 13 months. Now, in terms of the budget changes, KPMG did some analysis on that. What they said was these changes would lead to a reduction of 50% in group insurance cover, a 42% reduction in total premiums. And then they went on to say that if this was implemented as proposed, it could lead to an increase of 26% in the premiums for remaining members. So that does not achieve the government's policy objective. And what's more, it'll leave a whole bunch of Australians without insurance cover that they may well need. I want to end by saying, don't stop believing. I know what I've said this morning is challenging and it's going to be a difficult next 12 months as we work through much of this. But keep in mind that what you do is certainly adding great value to your clients, and even if the general public don't recognise it, undoubtedly your clients do. Thank you very much.